Welcome to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission. Today's date is Wednesday, November 2nd, 2011. Time is 5:12. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Astorian?
Here.
Commissioner Landrigan is not here. Commissioner Sheets?
Here.
Commissioner Yesayans, not yet here. And Chairperson Lee.
Here. Report regarding posting of the agenda.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, October 26, 2011, on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
Thank you. Can Commissioner Astorian lead us in pledge?
If you had to. Please follow me and I'll pledge our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, let's go through the minutes for October 17th. Have any comments, corrections?
I move that we accept the minutes from Monday, October 17th.
Well, with the minor correction, there is a correction for October 17th one.
Okay.
I guess page 4 on the votes, the ayes, instead of Commissioner Yesayan, should be Lee. You see that motion on draft comprehensive design guidelines? Okay, thank you. So with that correction,
So moved.
okay. Support?
Yes, second.
Okay, so we have a motion and support. The minute for the October 19th regular meeting.
I move that we accept the minutes for October 19th.
Okay, there's a motion, support?
Second.
Okay, motion and support. So both October 17th and October 19th meeting minutes has been approved with the one minor correction. Okay, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda, and the speaker is limited to 5 minutes. And Commission may question the speaker, but there is no debate or decision. So we have for oral communication, Mr. Herbert Milano.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Lee and Commissioners. My name is Herbert Milano. I came before you a couple of weeks ago making a suggestion that the Planning Commission, in my opinion, and according to the objectives of the City Charter, that is within your purview to review the general documents and the general planning documents that the city has. So in addition to the land use element, the recreational element, all these other things that define our quality of life. And I stated that it's my contention that the chair of this commission can direct the city staff to put on the agenda issues having to do with the city's compliance to its planning documents. And it is to that issue that I bring up the following. I have a document here that was made, is a final master environmental impact report of 1996. In this document, the city planned for and specified the requirements that it needed to fulfill in order to mitigate the growth of the downtown areas. And on page 4.9-1, it states that as approximately 15.1 acres of new parkland is proposed to be developed in the centers, and so on. These particular pages define the objectives that the city had in order to comply with the growth in population and how to mitigate it. As the city moves forward to other types of approvals, here's one for Verdugo Gardens. This goes back to 2007. And in this particular document, due to the significant density, there are pages that I've highlighted here that indicate what the city must do in order to mitigate the shortage of parkland. I have here a couple of other documents. This is a little recognition of my involvement in the planning of downtown, the downtown specific plan. And these are the documents having to do with the Glendale downtown specific plan. During those discussions and in these documents, again and again, we find that there is within the plans of the city of Glendale the objectives of mitigating the problem of the shortage of parkland in the areas that are of the highest density. The problem that we have is that most of the commissioners that are brought forward don't live in the downtown areas. And even though you may have business interests there, the density and the lack of adequate parkland is still not being addressed forcefully, and that's why I'm suggesting that you bring this up and have the staff bring to you, so that in the future, as you make decisions, you have these documents before you. I have another document that is available on the city's website, and it's available there on the screen. And that document demonstrates, for example, how in Recreational Planning Area 10, we have 0.017 acres per 1,000 population. And the goals of the city of Glendale is 6 acres per 1,000. Yet, this is a particular document that's at least 3 years old, if not 4. And yet the population has increased significantly, but very little has been done with regard to mitigating that problem. Now, if I were to scroll to many of the other planning areas, like Recreational Planning Area 9 and then the others, you will see a significant shortage and a discrepancy between these areas and the areas north of the city, or north of downtown. And it is my intention to bring this to your attention because it needs a significantly proactive approach from all of you to address these issues. Just recently, the city moved forward on this 320-some-odd unit apartment complex that is going to bring a significant amount of traffic. But I'm asking you to concentrate on the area of adequate parkland for the residents as you increase the density. There are issues with traffic, but I want you to look at this part of the area of the city of Glendale that requires significant attention, and so that as you make decisions, you have these planning documents before you as you move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think when Mr. Milano brought this issue before us, I think 2 meetings back, we did ask the staff to take a look at this. What is the status? Mr. Ghani?
Mr. Milano is referring to the old standards that are in the general plan, but the Commission is aware that the City Council adopted parks and libraries fees a few years back. That while we are having projects that are not necessarily mitigating by providing park space, that they can mitigate the shortage of park space by paying an in lieu fee, an exaction fee, to the city to create parks over the long term, and effectively paying the parks fee will mitigate the impact that they are creating in the park space. And the city attorney here could correct me or add anything that I may have missed.
Members of the Commission, I would just add that the particular fee issue is sort of a sliding scale in terms of how it was originally imposed, and then over a couple of years it'll increase. And so as the fee gets to the full fee that was assessed in the fee study, you'll have full mitigation. In some projects, there's not full mitigation, and they've either the city council or the approving body or the redevelopment agency has had to make findings that the project did not fully mitigate the impacts. But the intent of the impact fee is when it's at its full level, it will fully mitigate the impact the projects are having to our parks and recreation facilities. So that's all I would add.
Thank you. Any comments from commissioners?
Yes, if I may, and also, Mr. Garcia, this development impact fee that has been proposed and accepted and adopted, the monies are earmarked to create green space around the downtown area where it's the most impacted part. So I wanted to add that too.
Okay, thank you. Let's make a note that Commissioner Sayan joined us.
Welcome.
So moving right along, zoning appeal, we have new business, conditional use permit number PCUP 2011-012, and proposed mitigated negative declaration PEIF 2007-002, and the location is 1650 Hesbeth Lane. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. As mentioned, this is an appeal of an approved conditional use permit and environmental, which is to allow construction of a new single-family house on a lot with an average current slope exceeding 50% and where more than 1,500 cubic yards of grading or earth material are being moved. And this is located in the R1R Restricted Residential Zone, Floor Area District 2. The appellant is requesting that the Planning Commission reverse the hearing officer's approval of the conditional use permit. Requirement for conditional use permit for new dwelling unit construction is to obtain public input on infill development where the potential impacts of such development are anticipated to be concerns of the surrounding public. The purpose is to provide specific conditions to assure compatibility with its surroundings. Pursuant to Section 30.42.030 of the Glendale Municipal Code, a conditional use permit may be granted only if all of the following conditions or following findings of fact can be made. The first one, that the proposed use will be consistent with the various elements and objectives of the general plan. Second, that the use and its associated structures and facilities will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare or the environment. Third, that the use and facilities will not adversely affect or conflict with adjacent uses or impede the normal development of surrounding property. And fourth, that adequate public and private facilities such as utilities, landscaping, parking spaces, traffic circulation measures are or will be provided for the proposed use. Negative declaration case PEIF 2007-002, the updated and revised, was adopted by the hearing officer as part of her approval. The update relates to the total cut being reduced from 7,494 square feet, or cubic yards, to 4,760 cubic yards. The total export remains at 0. In addition, the proposed house is being built into the hillside toward the rear of the saddle portion of the lot. The garage is detached, located at a lower elevation of the property. Further, county assessor maps the subject property has a lot area of 287,930 square feet, or 6.61 acres, and a frontage of 135 feet on Hasbeth Lane. The property is 10 times, or approximately 10 times, the minimum lot size for subdivision purposes. The land use element of the general plan designates the property as low-density residential, and just a quick tour I've got provided for your review, and you have it in your packets as well. Architectural plans located on the front board, as well as some elevations and one survey, and then the panel over here I have on the left is a grading section and a topo map, as well as the zoning of the surrounding area and an aerial photograph. On the site plan, you'll see as you come toward the end of the driveway that there's a fire department turnaround being proposed on what's called the flat pad portion of the site. The fire department believes that the proper safe measures, for example, fire sprinklers, brush clearance, providing fire-resistant vegetation, can be taken as part of the design and construction of the house to assure that the house and surrounding area will be protected from fire. The site consists of a vacant hillside lot with an average current slope of 66%. The lot slopes uphill from the street and contains varied topography that includes several peaks and valleys. The proposed building site, again in the saddle portion of the lot, is below the level of the ridgetop homes surrounding the property along Deermont and Rimcrest, and also Glenmont. And subject site is above the homes along Hasbeth Lane, Larkaway, and Darrell. The applicant is proposing to construct a 3,278 square foot two-story single-family dwelling with a detached three-car garage. The applicant is also proposing to construct a tram and a stairway that will follow the grade and recess into the hill, providing access to the house from the garage level. Per Code Section 30.32.130B1, all required driveways leading to parking or loading areas shall be located completely on the same lot, the same parking or loading areas. The detached garage will be accessed off of a driveway located completely on the subject property. Common driveways taking access over other property typically increases neighborhood conflict. So the city has a requirement, as I mentioned in that code section, for private driveways, and it clarifies the ownership issues for that. The proposed house will be approximately 244 feet from the southwest property line at its closest point, 206 feet from the west property line at its closest point, and 119 feet from the eastern property line at its closest point. The minimum required interior setback is 10 feet. In comparison, the proposed home setback is much greater than the nearby ridgetop homes. The proposed single-family house will require 4,760 cubic yards of grading, which works out to 2,380 cubic yards of cut and 2,380 cubic yards of fill. This area includes the driveway, cutting a portion of the hill to accommodate a terrace around the house, and the proposed stairway to provide access to the house from the garage level. Dirt excavated from the cut is proposed to remain on site, some of which will be placed as a non-structural fill on the existing pad, a flat pad. The dirt is proposed to slope up and away from the neighboring homes, as measured from the fire department turnaround to the garage level, and it spreads out approximately 30 feet in height and 100 feet in length. And that's shown on the grading plan. If the excavated dirt were to be exported from the site, it would take approximately 396 truck trips, based on a single truck carrying 6 cubic yards at a time. The applicant is also proposing to place a 3-foot-high retaining wall with a 4-foot-wide drainage gutter approximately 5 feet away from the common property line with 1656 Hasbeth Lane. Retaining wall would be used to divert any drainage onto the subject property's driveway. Currently, all the drainage flows onto the private driveway and then down Hasbeth Lane from there. The proposal you have before you is an improvement to the current drainage situation. The proposed project complies with all aspects of the zoning code and complies with the hillside design guidelines in the following way. There are 5 roof lines that step up and the slope in 2 directions. In addition, the shape of the roofs follow the shape of the hillside. The house would be located on the saddle portion of the hill, which is integrated into the hillside, and then the house will be built into the hillside. The applicant is proposing to use colors and textures that blend with the natural hillside. The applicant is also proposing to use retaining walls to reduce the grading. Retaining walls are used along the driveway and near the house. The height of the retaining walls will not exceed 5 feet, and there will not be more than 3 walls in succession. This complies with both zoning ordinance and the hillside design guidelines. The building's massing has some variation in plane on each side of the structure. Proposed driveway accesses a detached 3-car garage located toward the bottom of the hill, and the garage is being built into the hill and will have only one side exposed to view. It should be noted that the department's urban designer has reviewed the proposed plans and has determined that the proposed design can be supported at the design review board level. We have testimony from the city engineer that he has reviewed the geologic reports as submitted by the applicant and has determined that if all the requirements as specified in those reports, the project can be developed in a safe manner. This is a normal process for grading permits for hillside development. The hearing officer's decision was based on being able to make all 4 of the required findings, considering the hillside design guidelines and the information provided at the application submittal and at the hearing, and adopting a negative declaration pursuant to CEQA. Subject property was subdivided in 1970 to allow for the construction of a single-family residence, taking access off a long private driveway from Hasbeth Lane. It was determined at that time that the property can be developed. Staff is recommending to sustain the hearing officer's approval and certification of the environmental review. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chan.
Can you elaborate on being proposed? On the tram that's being proposed, and how big it is, and as far as noise
In terms of
levels
the-
and how it's going to be operated?
Let the applicant get into the details of it, but basically from the garage level, there'll be a cart that you can stand in, and it follows the contours of the slope up to the house level. In terms of the noise, it's staff's understanding that it's basically the same as like an automatic garage door. So it's not something that's typically going to echo through the hillside. And staff's also provided photos, and I think there was some also included in the packet, of other trams within the city, as well as the specifications for that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I have a couple of comments to make.
Yes, sir.
First, from the appellant, the package that I got, this is truly remarkable, complete package that has been put together. And I'll be very honest with you, if I were, you know how these recipes that are get hand down from year to year and comes down to your wife and then to your daughter and so forth. In my case of my family, there's 4 different languages that in the margins are written on it and so forth. Seriously, we are as diverse as Glendale. And if I were to look at this thing as a recipe, a cookbook that is getting hand down, the part that really grabbed my eye and piqued my interest was that part that had to do with the conversations about the easement between the two of you, the appellant and the applicant. That was really, these are the margin notes that I'm telling you that in, handwritten and so forth. So I commend you on that. As far as the applicant is concerned, Mrs. Luzirega, I have checked the kind of work that you've done and your team has done on this thing. So I have to congratulate you, having gone through all of these years and wanting to complete and getting it to where it's at. But most importantly, and I had to get this out, Mr. Collin, I don't mean to be obsequious at this moment. However, I think the report that you put out was terrific. It was a great deal of thought and sequential logic that has gone in it. Just thought I had to get that out. So
Commissioner Stearns, do you have any questions? Mr. Collins?
I do, but I'll yield to
Okay.
Commissioner Sheets first and then
Commissioner
continue.
I do have a question. I'm trying to understand, if you can give me a little help, about the access to the lot, where that stands from the standpoint that the lot developed or was part of the development and ended up being kind of landlocked. What rights do they have there, and how did that happen? Or I'm not trying to get into the legal part, but they have. I guess I'm asking a question. Do they have rights to have a driveway?
They have
an
rights,
entrance?
and that's per parcel map 1054, which was adopted in 1970.
Okay.
And they do have frontage on Hasbeth, which is one of the zoning code requirements, which basically prevents them from being landlocked.
Right. So
And it's more than 80 feet wide. The minimum is 80 feet for frontage.
so that would be the slope.
80 feet is the width that's measured 15 feet back from the property line adjacent to the street
As far as access,
to Hasbeth,
okay.
being able to create it as a legal lot.
All right. And that would have to happen down at the cul-de-sac where they would get that access.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Historian.
I have a question from staff about transitional slopes and the hillside guidelines that states that there are no developments that are supposed to take place on transitional slopes. I believe in your report the driveway was not considered as a transitional slope. I mean, not as a structure. Is that what the reasoning is? That
That's
driveway
correct.
is
Staff's opinion that a driveway is not considered a structure, and that the hillside design guidelines in this case were more focused on subdivisions as well as actual buildings or along that line, not driveways. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So it's not considered as a structure.
Correct.
It's considered as an access, period.
Access to the property.
Right now, in the case of the private road, are the trash bins and so forth kind of pushed all the way to Hasbet? Maybe this is something that I should ask the applicant afterwards. Can you explain to me what a 4-1 fill area, that there was a mention of a 4-to-1 fill area needs to be redesigned in your report?
4-to-1.
I think it was referring to the slope of the proposed driveway on the skirt of Glenmont Slope.
That would be an area I think Rubik, or the city engineer, would be able to address better.
Okay, so that's one question that I have. And then there was a comment, again, made that the street design for Hasbet Lane not acceptable. I think it was one of the comments from either Public Works and the review, the interdepartmental reviews, that the crossfall slope was too steep, larger than 15%.
And to
Somebody
staff's
also-
knowledge, to staff's knowledge, that has been taken care of
It has been?
prior to the planning hearing officer meeting. So
Okay, but by
plans,
taking care of, in other words, it no longer is a concern of the Public Works? Is that what it is?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, both of those items have already been addressed in the revised design submitted by the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Yasayan, you have any more?
No.
Got it. I have one question. You mentioned that 30 feet high, the fill, I guess, that comes out of the excavation will be on the flat pad, which is, I guess, also not compacted fill. Is there a normal practice to do that, to put, without really stabilizing the pad? And, is there part of the procedure when you dump the excavation, get it, excavated soil, that you do not compact and you just dump it on there? Because to me, the 30 feet high fill on top of the fill,
that slopes back.
it seems quite massive. So I just had it, and there is some concern from the private report geologists, addressing that. So have we really taken a close look at that, and you feel comfortable with the proposed fill there?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, based on our calculation off of the plans submitted by the applicant, at the worst-case scenario, at the highest height, it's only going to be 13 feet, not 30 feet. Not sure what the report had indicated, but that's what our calculations show.
Okay, because somewhere along the report, I saw 30 feet, right?
Can I continue on that?
Yes, please.
What came to my mind in thinking about the non-compacted fill going on the non-compacted lot was what impact that would have on the slopes relative to the newly required drainage system. Because now it follows the natural path and goes down the small channel and down onto the private driveway. So there's two parts to the question. One, what would be the impact? Would there be some danger relative to the drainage coming down the slope and onto the non-compacted fill? And then in addition to that, I had a question came to my mind in talking about the drainage and where it has to go, and it's supposed to go to the street. In this scenario, would the street be the private driveway? Would the street be down the newly prepared driveway and out into the public street?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sheets, member of the Commission, to answer your first question, when the applicant, assuming this process, the Planning Commission approves the applicant's application, and we get to the stage of submitting for permits, we will require the soils engineer hired by the applicant to address the uncompacted fill. They will not be allowed to place uncompacted fill within the path of any kind of drainage. answer your second question, the majority of the drainage will be captured and conveyed into our existing and the newly built storm drain system. What gets left off and gets drained off the newly built driveway will be drained into the street Hasbrook Lane. And that will be the lesser of the drainage.
Thank you.
One more question is that the appellant claims that they have a new findings that they wanted to for us to consider. Has the staff received all the new, I guess, additional evidences that appellant claims that they have? Did you have an opportunity to review that?
There was 2 geologic reports that were submitted by Mr. Michael, one dated July 5th, one dated July 8th, and those were submitted at the time or before of the hearing before the hearing officer. So those were included or considered as part of the hearing officer's review and decision-making of this project.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, the copy that we got today that was passed out to all of us, are these copies of the July 8, right? Or from Mr. Michaels?
There was one for November 1st that was not part of
okay, so that's what I'm trying to get at. Is there any new information on that? Was staff being provided that?
Staff got this right at the
November
beginning
1st?
of the meeting.
So we haven't had a chance.
So I guess on the decision making that we're making today, are we considering November 1st submittal that's been submitted today as part of our, or should we not? Ms. Garcia.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, it's really the decision. It should be included because it was submitted prior to the hearing.
Okay.
But obviously, given the late time it was submitted, you cannot be expected to have read through. So it's part of the record. You're entitled to rely on what was submitted to you in package and the testimony, and make that other document submitted at the time of the hearing or immediately prior just part of the record.
Thank you. Okay, if we don't have, yes, sir.
I had another question relative to the geology and the engineering. It comes to my attention that Glenmont Road, if I look at the lay of the land out there now, there's a lot of natural things that have happened over time, but my sense is that there's a chance of slippage. There's some evidence that some of that has occurred, and actually walking along Glenmont, it's not a completely structurally improved street, for lack of a better term, and it's asphalt. On the downhill side, my concern would be that as we start to do heavy work down below on the slope, that it could impact in numerous spots along Glenmont as far as slippage, breakaway or something like that as a possibility. So from my background, it seems to me sometimes when you take on a project and you have an endeavor you want to complete, you kind of buy what's there. If something's going to be impacted, you kind of have to take care of it if you think it's going to happen. And so I would wonder, is there some requirement and some part of the research that would speak to, I didn't see anything in the package that would speak to the fact that if I'm up there doing heavy digging and building the foundations and such, should some reinforcement happen on Glenmont, and how do we find that out?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sheets, members of the Commission, that's a valid concern, and I have personally observed the subsidence. I wouldn't call it slippage as much. But again, when the time comes during the permit process, we will require a detailed investigation and the corresponding mitigation measures just in case something like that happens. And you're absolutely right. If the cause is the construction, the new construction, then the property owner, the developer, will be basically responsible to fix whatever caused the problem.
Okay.
But it will be addressed during the permitting process.
Along the same line, because I read the appellant's submittal here, in the photo 5 of the April 8th, 2010 report, it does address 2 areas of evidence of unstable conditions in the east slope. Are you aware of that?
Again, I wouldn't call it as much an unstable condition. There has been evidence of subsidence, and the developer, the property owner, their engineer, including the geotechnical soils engineering, and within the report, they will have to address that.
Okay. So probably the same question I'll probably ask the source engineer. Okay. Do I have any more questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now with that, I'd like to go to appellant. And you have 15 minutes. You can combine your efforts, utilize 15 minutes however you want to.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Is this on? My name is Peter Wright, and I'm an attorney, and I am primarily the spokesman on behalf of the appellants in this matter. However, there are a number of engineering issues that I do not feel qualified to address, and Mr. Dunn, Michael, is here, and I would like to allow him to speak for about 5 minutes on what the issues are that he feels are important, with your permission, and then I would come up and make the comments that I have.
Okay.
My name is Eugene Donald Michael, 30473 Mulholland Highway, number 179, Agoura Hills. I am a registered California geologist, certified in engineering geology and hydrogeology. I want to make sure that you have before you, for the record, my original report on this property dated April 6, 2010. My report dated July 5th, 2011, and my November 1st, 2011 report, all done for my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Kurt Kirsch, who live on Hasbeth Lane. The problem that has arisen here is the fact that Hasbeth Lane and Glenmont Drive both were graded in the 1950s, before there was a grading code, not just in Glendale, but anywhere in the state of California, so far as we know. Looking at the area, if I'm going to speak over there. If you can't hear me, please let me know. Pardon me? So I can't?
You guys have a microphone or the pointer?
Oh, good. This is a good one. Thank you. Well, this is Hasbeth Lane, and this is Glenmont Drive here. Addressing the problem of the Glenmont Drive first. The slope is fairly high, and it's underlain by landslide debris, artificial fill, and some kind of soil materials. And the only problem with that is that the developers, consultants so far don't know the various thicknesses of those materials. That is why there's a serious question as to whether or not the driveway can be graded to begin with without knowing the characteristics of those materials. Cutting into that slope, which will be necessary for the driveway, will reduce the stability of those materials on that slope. And so the concern here is not that the driveway can't be constructed safely, but how it's to be constructed. And if the thing is just handed over to the contractor without him knowing exactly how what the distribution of those loads may be. He won't know how to notch the slope in order to do it properly. That is one objection of the project that is now proposed. But the main objection is that Hasbeth Lane is underlain by fill that was placed in the 1950s, and even the developers, consultant Geosystems, has demonstrated that the base of that material is it's uncompacted and below standard, and therefore probably the fill along Hasbeth Lane has a safety factor of less than 1.5 and of some magnitude which we're not sure. The real problem with this project thus far is that it is proposed to load the vacant lot in the applicant's property, which is which will be placed on the same fill that underlies the rest of Hasbeth Lane, including some 5 developed residences. The Kirsch house is the one nearest the vacant lot. Loading that vacant lot, the fill on that vacant lot, according to simple Newtonian physics, will impart a driving force that is higher than the driving force that now exists along that fill. We need to know the characteristics of the base of that existing fill. We have to know the coefficient of friction, or the angle of internal friction as is normally stated. We have to know the distribution of the loads all along Hasbeth Lane before you can safely load or decide whether or not you can safely load the vacant lot with those 2,000 to 3,000 cubic yards of fill that, as I understand, are now proposed. That's a heavy load. A cubic yard of the material they're going to place there is something in excess of a ton. So 3,000 cubic yards is a lot of load, and it is a certainty. It's a matter about which geologists and engineers cannot differ, that if you place that load on this vacant lot, it will impart a new driving force to the existing fill which underlies all of the developed properties along Hasbeth Lane. There is no question that unless it is determined what the stability, the existing coefficient of friction, the existing safety factor along Hasbeth Lane is now, that placing that additional fill on the vacant lot, you're just rolling the dice. Are there any questions?
If I may, you mentioned something about the load factor of Hasbeth Lane that is below safety, or some measure that you gave us right now about Hasbeth Lane.
To place a fill now in City of Glendale, as well as other jurisdictions, requires a safety factor of 1.5.
What is Hasbeth Lane?
Hasbeth Lane, what about it?
The safety factor. You mentioned something that the Hasbeth Lane, because it was built...
Oh, Hasbeth Lane has a safety factor because it's been stable since it was built in the 1950s.
Oh.
But the magnitude of that safety factor is undetermined.
So in other words, it could be overly safe or not safe at all.
It could be 1.1, something greater than unity, of course, but it's probably not too bad because it's been there for 50-some years, 60 years, and it's been stable.
Is that a concern of yours, sir?
Is what a concern?
That 1.1 or less than 1.1 for Hasbeth Lane?
Not so long as the physical conditions are not changed, but the physical condition that's proposed will be changed if they place this fill that's now proposed on the vacant lot.
That, to me, if I may, Mr. Chair, sounds a little bit, and I'm not a technical, I'm not a geologist by no means, but if that was a concern, why propose or why want to work with the applicant on continuing the private road as an egress and egress to the property that was going to be built? If the concern was Hasbeth Lane, and we can't figure out what and it's been built for 50, 60 years, but nonetheless it may or may not be overly safe or not safe, putting it in layman's terms, why propose even the private lane to be continued to the applicant's house? As evidence from the attorney's letter of June of 2010.
Maybe I'm a little dense. Could you rephrase the question?
You sure you?
I'm not sure what...
Okay. You just stated that there may be a safety concern with Hasbet Lane. Not so much so because it was built back 50 years ago, 40, 50 years ago.
Yes.
If that safety is a factor, why even propose for Hasbet Lane through the private drive to be continued as you did in your previous iteration of this case to the applicant's proposed site of building the house?
He didn't propose.
I may understand you. Originally, the question was whether or not the applicant could safely build a house on the existing vacant lot. Is that what you were referring to?
No, but I guess that's a question that I'll ask the attorney. But I'm clear what you're telling me. What you're telling me is that you have a concern, not as much maybe, that even Hasbet Lane does not have that safety factor that you're looking for as a geologist.
It has some safety factor that's greater than Unity, but we don't know its magnitude. And what we also don't know is what that magnitude would be if the loads that are now proposed by the waste fill are to be placed on the vacant lot.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, along the same, I have one, piggybacking on that question. You are referring to your concern on the Hasbet Lane, but what about the existing houses itself? What bearing does that have? By putting the fill on top of the fill, have on the house pads itself?
The 4 or 5 developed residential properties on Hasbet Lane rest on this fill. That fill has a safety factor in excess of Unity, but we don't know how much. That same fill underlies the vacant lot where the new fill is proposed to be placed. Placing that new fill on that vacant lot will, without question, increase the driving force that already exists due to the fill along Hasbet Lane. The fill along Hasbet Lane is a mass which is in the gravitational field of the Earth. Therefore, there is a component of force that's acting down Hasbet Lane at the base of that fill. The question is, how much additional driving force would be placed as a result of the additional fill in the vacant lot? And we just don't know that. Nobody knows that. Any other questions?
I guess I'm assuming that this is all part of the same Pelham team. We got Delma, Kurt, Kirsch, and Mr. Peter Wright and Mr. Michael, correct? You.
Hello again. I'm Peter Wright. My address is 100 West Broadway, Suite 900, Glendale, California. I'm an attorney, and I'm representing Kurt and Delma Kirch at 1656 Hasbeth Drive. Their home is the very top home on Hasbeth Drive. They are incredibly concerned about the engineering issues involving this. It frightens them terribly, but they don't know what they can do other than hire a geologist to give them an opinion as to what is safe and what is not. What they hear is frightening to them because that's where they live. The concern they have is that when you read through the environmental impact report and you read through the report by Mr. Collins, everything on that issue is disposed of with a wave of the hand. Well, we'll get to that when we get to that, when in fact this is the last opportunity my clients have to give their input to that, and when the design actually is prepared, they won't have an opportunity to say anything about it. Yet it is an important environmental issue, critically important to them. It could affect the stability of their home. They don't want Glenmont Lane down in their yard. They don't want the driveway down in their yard. Yet the information they get from Mr. Michael completely disinterested person, other than he was hired by my clients to make a report, says that these are serious considerations that are not being addressed anywhere in what you have before you. Moving on, what my clients originally were concerned about, and this is the third iteration that they have been involved in regarding a project at this location, is really the same issues that concerned the City Council, the City of Glendale in 1993 when they adopted the Hillside Development Guidelines. I have been through all this in the 70s. I spent 5 years in the city attorney's office and worked at this from that side. The City Council became more and more concerned about how the hillsides in the City of Glendale were being torn up unnecessarily by unwell-developed plans. If you look through, I know that you're probably so intimately familiar with the Hillside Development Guidelines, you can tell me what page these things are on, yet nevertheless, when you go through it and you see the various things that the City Council was concerned about, and in fact, in the last two hearings, the City Council had the very same concerns, that the issues are the unnecessary destruction of the natural terrain, the unnecessary destruction of natural vegetation, the redoing of the hillside, making what was there originally different from the way it was originally. Those are all major concerns. And at the very hearings before the City Council last time, I don't know if you saw them or not, those very same issues were the concern of the City Council at that time. Now, in Mr. Collins' report, he said, we take these things one at a time as we look at them. We don't consider what happened on previous projects. Yet, in all due respect, that's exactly what he did in his report. If you look at his report on page 4, he does 4 and 5, a detailed comparison of this project to the last project. In other words, he feels perfectly privileged in comparing the projects, but we're not privileged in saying the reason those prior projects failed was because of these issues regarding the impact on the hillside. This was a subdivision, and this is a lot on the subdivision, but it's very interesting that the subdivision was approved with a graded pad, and the graded pad is still there. A home can be built on that graded pad, so far as we know. No one has said it can't be. And the problem here is that the applicant for this project wants to build the home at the top. Originally, there were a road going up to the top one way. The house was moved from the front of the knoll to the top of the knoll, and the road went up another way. Each time the road went through natural terrain, cut through a natural water course, cut through the side of the slope, and the City Council said that completely violates what we meant to say in the Hillside Development Guidelines. So this is kind of a ruse when you think about it. They're going to get around it by a tram and steps. Well, the tram is going to be this very straight thing which falls in the teeth of the Hillside Development Guideline, where you have to have the slope have natural curvature, and the steps also have to be graded and cut into the slope. Where are those steps? Exactly where, or in the close vicinity of where the road was last time. Excuse me. My question, and I put about a 12-page report together, and I hope you had a chance at least to scan it, but if you didn't, I understand. One of the things that I asked was, how are you going to build a house at the top of the hill without destroying the hillside in order to do it? The response we got from planning is that, well, they'll go up the tramway and they'll go up the stepway, but those are 50 and 60% slope. I don't know, maybe a bulldozer can get up there, but you're not going to be able to get a truck to transport rock up and down. They are going to have to cut a road into the hillside, exactly in violation of what the City Council did not want on prior iterations. How can they possibly do it? How can they get that up there? And the garage is here, the parking is down here, and the fire department says, well, if you do this and that, sprinkler system and not having the vegetation brush clearance, that it's going to be safe. That's never safe anywhere else. The fire department has always required to have access to the home. The problem with this home is at the top of a hill, and if there's an explosion or some reason why this house catches on fire and the sprinklers and the brush doesn't stop it, and we have a little bit of wind, we are going to have sparks all over the neighborhood to start fires. And the fire department is going to be coming at a place well below it. Maybe the hook and ladder can get up there, maybe not, but that issue is not addressed.
Can you wrap it up, Mr. Wright?
Excuse me?
Could you wrap it up?
Yes. Obviously, there are a lot of issues that concern my client. The drain. Well, I'll finish with just the draining issue. Previously, the water came down through kind of a natural gully, and as it went across the ground to Hasbeth Lane, some would soak in, some would be slowed down by the terrain, and then it would reach Hasbeth Lane and would go down there. Now, the pipe is going to catch it right at the bottom of the ravine, and it's going to carry that water without seepage into the ground or without slowing it down, and is going to dump it onto Hasbeth Lane. There have been nothing done with this project to handle this additional water. What is going to happen to the homes? What's going to happen when people try to drive during a heavy rainstorm up through there? Our problems are...
Chairman Lee, would you like to give him an additional 5 minutes since his
Because we had a
presentation was interrupted before with the question? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. You have 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay. I had skipped over a number of things. That essentially is another issue. I hope that the construction of this home needs to be addressed here. This is the only time we are going to have an opportunity to find out that there's a way to build this home up there without tearing the hillside up. We've all seen construction projects. You have all these conditions, and then you go up there and you find out that one of the contractors has staged his material in a place that you never anticipated, gotten a truck somewhere where you never anticipated, and when it's all over, our best intentions are thwarted because there was no plan to have the project constructed in a way that actually served the purpose of the hillside development guidelines. And my clients who live right below it, and they look at this area, they are very concerned about that, and I think you'll hear that other people in the neighborhood are equally concerned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Any questions for the opponent?
There was going to be a question about the easement. I mean,
Well, Commissioner Sterling,
don't have it now.
You want to touch on that?
Yeah, perhaps. Mr. Wright, what I'm hearing from your geologist and yourself at this moment is about the safety of the project, the fire, the drainage, and so forth.
Geology, correct.
Yes. And my question to you, and this is not meant to as anything but me understanding a little bit more than what I do at this moment. Your June 2010 letter was offering, I have a copy of it here, if you'd like to, I'll give it to you. Your June 2000, there were 6 conditions in your June 2010 letter proposing to the applicant. If your concerns were safety, geology, and so forth, how come those concerns were not present in this letter? This letter only talked about the easement, giving them the right to the 6 points, which I think the point of contention was point number 2, and so forth. I'm just saying that, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it was unsafe then, if it's unsafe now, it was unsafe then. Why were you proposing then an easement allowance and so forth, and there were extensive negotiations on the private road easement and so forth, if this project was so horribly unsafe? That's all, sir. I need to know.
A very simple explanation. My clients own that easement. It has value. They were willing to give a right-of-way over that easement. It burdened them, but they were willing to give it to them for free if this developer would build on the pad and not have these horrible hillside development and engineering problems that we are now having to continually face. They didn't think that there was a problem, engineering problem, at least I didn't when I wrote that letter, with building on the existing pad. And that's what that was about. This was the quid pro quo. We will give you access to that pad over our easement if you will build there.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
I'm sorry. When was your engineer's report was previous to this, or was it after this letter that you sent them?
At that time, we did not have an engineer report, right?
Okay. And I'll be very honest with you. You know, there is discussions, and by the way, I commend you and the applicant to having gone as far as you did, because I thought you guys were so close to get this thing done that I was flabbergasted when I read it fell apart. But here's the thing. When you look at the 6 conditions that you have here, unless your position has changed at this moment, that now it's unsafe, but it wasn't unsafe then. At the time, they had presented all kinds of drawings for their project and so forth. There was never talk about putting their development on the flat pad at the bottom of the hillside. And now I'm hearing that that's something new. Certainly there was no mention of that in your letter. Having said that, quite frankly, you know, the 6 conditions that you had, with the exception of 1 or 2, I thought it was that's the route that should have been taken. But that's what I wanted to clear.
Well,
My time is up.
We did have those discussions. I met with their civil engineer. I really respect George Bogosian. I think he's one of the best in the business. And we talked about relocating, but everything was hypothetical. You know, what about here and there? But in our discussions, actual discussions, it was, the quid pro quo was, if you will use the flat pad, we will give you an easement over our property.
Commissioner Schitz.
Just to clarify, Commissioner Astorian said that your one main issue was the safety. I think also, didn't you say that the concern was the intent of the hillside ordinance? Wasn't that another point that you were making in your statement?
Yeah, I broke it in.
You don't have to go into detail, but I mean, wasn't that another big part? You mentioned a number of things about the hillside ordinance and what it was trying to create and how this would impact it.
That was originally the primary concern of my clients. Later on, we found out these engineering issues came through.
That's good.
And so, but the genesis of all this was the hillside development.
Sure. Thanks.
I have a question for you. On this easement issue, your condition was that if they build it on the pad, that you will grant this easement rights. Now, you have Yeah, I mean, you are aware of the new location, which has been, I guess, brought down, and then there's a considerable amount of, the earthwork that's been reduced. Where it's being proposed now, are you agreeable to still extending easement rights if they pursue, the development at the location that they are proposing right now? Or are you still insisting on them building on that pad?
All I can say is we have never seen, up to this minute, a proposal for a house at the top of the slope that is not going to do serious harm to the hillside in violation of the hillside development. We think this project is going to be as harmful or more harmful than any project that they have submitted.
So to clarify, so your condition for rights to use that easement is only if they build it on the pad?
I can't say that. I talked to George Bogosian, engineer Bogosian, about moving it down and maybe at the back of the pad, maybe up the slope a little bit, but without having to have a road that goes up to it, or a tram, or a stairway, but maybe at the back of the pad, not necessarily on the pad. I talked to him about that, and at the time, nothing was resolved. He was going to talk to his client and get back to me, and nobody ever got back to me. So that's where it was.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll hear from the applicant. Now, yes, applicant has 15 minutes to present your case. Now, are you coming up as a team? Is Mr. Dean?
Yes.
Will Mr. Bogosian and L'Oreal? I apologize if I'm butchering the owner of the property. You'll be all presenting it as a team, right?
And also there's a Richard Ramirez, which he has a card, so
Right.
if he could follow myself and George Bogosian,
Okay.
we appreciate it. Sorry. Can you cue the presentation we have? Okay, I'm Fred Dean. I'm the applicant. I live in Westlake Village, California. I'm an architect for this project, licensed and registered in California. We are requesting that you uphold the conditional use approval granted recently for one single-family residence on a 6-acre site located at 1650 Hasbeth Lane. We wholeheartedly agree with the findings of the hearing officer. The project is a 3,278 square foot, two-story single-family residence to be located in the center of a 6-acre site on what we're calling the Saddle. The site was, we are proposing with the CUP as the Saddle, which was suggested by Councilman Weaver during a previous application as good exposure to the elements and good views. The Saddle lies between a major slope to the north and the knoll to the south, out of the way of the natural drainage flows to the east towards Hasbeth and the west towards Larco Way. Saddle site right there. You can see the whole site, shape of the site in the black outline. Its position behind the knoll lessens its visual visual impact, to the surrounding neighborhoods and Glendale in general. The proposed house is nestled back into the northern hillside with its 2 stories and roof line stepping up with the slopes of the hillside as recommended in the hillside design guidelines. A small flat area has been created to the east, west, and south of the structure with varying height retaining walls having a maximum of 5 feet. This is to allow access all around the structure, which is required by fire department, also to give a small yard. And the area of this building site is 6,855 square feet. This includes the building footprint itself and all the yard area around. Other building sites in the neighborhood are of a similar size. For instance, the Kirches is 6,000 square feet. The house below that is 5,000. The building pad and the yard and everything, and the next one down is about 5,500. So we feel this is a compatible site area. The driveway, the access to the site, or any portion of this property is challenging because of the shape of the lot and the building site's relationship to the public street and its terrain. In order to reach any buildable part of the site, a 250-foot long driveway section has to be constructed at the base of the eastern slope below the Glenmont private drive from the Hasbeth cul-de-sac to the flat area of the site. So from access as there to just that portion right there, 250-foot section I'm talking about there, and that's sort of a gimme in this project. For this CUP application, we again had discussions with the immediate neighbors along the CUP private drive, exploring the possibilities of easement as we've been talking about. But of course, and all that correspondence, I guess you've been reading through and seeing, but that agreement could be reached. Because this property has frontage along the Hasbeth public right-of-way, this is the access that meets the zoning code. Any other access will not meet the zoning code and actually requires a variance, i.e. the private drive. The hearing officer makes note of this in her report. Her report also brings to light that at the time of the lot's creation, the city was aware that future access to this site would be by this method. Construction on this section has been kept to a minimum necessary to accomplish access. The driveway width has been kept to a minimum. The amount of retaining walls has been reduced to what is only necessary. The amount of grading and cut into the slope below Glenmont Private Drive has been reduced significantly to absolutely just what is necessary. Concern has been expressed about doing work on the slope because it may impact the stability of the slope. It is the professional opinion of myself as a registered architect, George Bogosian as the civil engineer for the project, Vince Carnegie of Geosystems, the geologist, consulting geologist, and and has been reviewed by Richard Ramirez as an independent consulting geologist, that the stability of this slope will be improved by the retaining walls and supporting caissons. In order to meet building codes, these walls will have to be designed to carry earth loads of this slope. This will give added stability where now there is none. George Bogosian, the civil engineer, will discuss this more. In order to shorten the overall driveway length from the 2 previous applications, we have created a garage for the residents underground towards the northern end of the flat area at the bottom of the surrounding slopes. This reduces the total driveway length from the previous applications to less than 500 linear feet. It also eliminates the driveway cutting across the slopes in this area. This is in response to previous concerns and conforming to the hillside design guidelines. Placing the garage underground also reduces its visual impact. In order to access the house from the garage, we are proposing a residential tram ascending the southeastern slope in front of the house. There will also be an exterior stairway accessing the building site. Both these methods of access to the house and the garage are out of the natural drainage flow and away from any potential mud flows, addressing concerns that have been brought forth in previous applications. They also follow the natural terrain. The tramway housing the tram tracks will be sunken below the grade and landscaped so that only the tram car will be visible as it ascends or descends. When parked, the car will appear to be part of the house or part of the garage. Equipment for the tram will be housed in the garage structure. When in operation, the tram's noise level is similar to a garage door, and that has been substantiated by the manufacturer in a letter that's on file. The steps run with the natural slope of the land. Any retaining walls associated with these steps are very low, 1 to 2 feet. And every effort actually will be made to eliminate these, any retaining walls during the construction. Total grading has been reduced to 4,932 cubic yards. Really only half of this amount, 2,466 cubic yards of earth, is being excavated because the same dirt that is being cut is being used as fill. All dirt being moved is being kept on site. There is no export, therefore there are no truck trips to the community. So as far as the findings of fact, we agree with the staff and the hearing officer's assessment of the 4 findings of fact. In our assessment, this project meets all 4 findings of fact for approval of the CUP as follows. Proposed use will be consistent with the various elements and objectives of the general plan because the proposed use is a single-family residence in an R1R zone, which is allowed use for this zone. The house is nestled into the hillside at a location that reduces its visual impact and is in keeping with the hillside design guidelines. The parcel is not within an area of critical concern for open space or conservative element. It is not within its designated primary, secondary ridge line or Bruce Stream area. The property is not in an area containing cultural or historic resources. The use and its associated structure and facilities will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare or environment because location of the residence was selected for its safety over other locations. It is out of the way of major drainage and on top of the saddle bearing on firm ground. Its location at the center of the property away from other residences is not detrimental to the neighborhood. The retaining walls of the proposed driveway will act to retain the slope below the Glenmont private drive, helping to stabilize it. The house will be constructed of an additional fire-resistant material such as concrete block, metal framing, fire-resistant glass, and have an above-average fire suppressant system for increased fire safety. The house will be placed behind the knoll. The house is going to be placed, hopefully, behind the knoll to reduce visual impact to the neighborhood and therefore its environmental impact. Separating the garage from the house and placing the garage at a readily accessible area of the site has reduced the length of the corresponding driveway access. The first half of the driveway length and location is dictated by the layout of the lot. It is the only access route through the lot from the public right-of-way to any buildable site on the property. The house is nestled in the hillside with a minimal footprint. The driveway does not cut across a natural hillside terrain. The slope below the Glendale private drive is not the natural hillside because it was formed by the construction of the Glendale private drive. The grading is balanced and no truck trips are required to transport dirt through the neighborhood. C, the use and facilities will not adversely affect or conflict with adjacent uses or impede the normal development of surrounding property because the proposed use is a single-family residence in an area of single-family residences. It is similar in size, height, and design compatibility with other houses in the neighborhood. The floor area ratio is 0.013, is well below other properties in the neighborhood. The house is placed in the center of a large 6-acre site and will not impact the neighboring houses or their privacy or loom above them. It has been located back out of the view corridor of the houses on Glenmont and below. The adequate public and private facilities such as utilities, landscaping, parking spaces, and traffic circulation measures are or will be provided for the proposed use because this is an established residential neighborhood with adequate existing infrastructure. Adequate on-site parking has been provided. The proposed landscape is consistent with the city guidelines and is in excess of its requirements. Concerning the geological issues, those are going to be addressed by others following me. I think the concept of the 30-foot fill was a statement by the appellant. 30 feet is actually the change in elevation, not the amount of fill. We have, and I have to say that too, we have not seen this latest geological report that was submitted yesterday, I guess. A few of the construction concerns. I mean, hillside development such as this is typical not typical, but very prevalent in Southern California. There are many hillsides around. This kind of construction challenges are faced every day by a lot of experienced contractors. And all disturbed areas around the buildings or drives will be landscaped or returned to their natural state anyway after construction is finished. Could you? So this is the site. Here we studied many places to put the house. Two of number 1 and number 6 were denied, and so now we're here at 3 at the saddle site. 3 is the saddle site here. Next, please. This looks at the various accesses to the site. So here is basically, Hasbeth cul-de-sac. There's a private drive there. We looked at accessing it along the private drive of Glenmont and even Larco, but that is incredibly problematic. Next slide, please. So here we are, same things. We're showing the public access to the site, and then in the red is the private drives. So here you can see in Hasbeth that we have the frontage, which allows us to build a driveway along this section. Next slide, please. So here are various pictures that show the location. This is Glenmont Road, and here is the saddle area. So you can see that this is behind, well, first of all, it's behind the knoll, and it's also at the end and even farther back than the Glenmont Private Drive. Next slide, please. Here is from Larco Way. I mean, here's the knoll back in through here. It's going to be very difficult to see the house back in through here. And I mean, there's already existing other houses that are on the top of the knoll, which of course we're not doing anymore. Next. Here's from the view from the Hasbeth Private Drive, and you can see the site is going to be tucked way back in through there. Next. Here is, once you get to the end of the private drive at the flat pad, and there is the siding of the house. Glenmont is over here, and these are the houses along Dearmont. One thing is that she is in the middle of a lot, and the lot is in the middle of several neighborhoods. And some of those neighborhoods have square footages, average square footages that are more than her square footage. The ones along Dearmont and Rimcrest, have, I think, 3,500 square foot average. And then, of course, the ones along Glenmont, Hasbeth, and Larco Way are 2,000 to 2,500. Next slide, please. Again, there's the site looking from the church's actual driveway. Here's where the site will be, tucked back behind the knoll. Again, next slide, please. And then this is the view from the Hasbeth cul-de-sac. And there is the site. I don't think you'll even be able to see from this Hasbeth cul-de-sac. Okay, next slide, please. Again, this is the Hasbeth cul-de-sac site location. Next slide. And then this is even from where Hasbeth Lane crosses Cumberland. And so the site is somewhere back up in there. Very, very difficult to distinguish or see. Next slide. And this is even farther out. Right. Cumberland and Kenneth. Next slide. So then this is, I think you've seen pictures of this. This is basically how we have nestled it into the hillsides, and it shows the stepping of the various roof lines to conform with the hillside design guidelines. Next slide. Here's a picture of a couple of trams. This is a tram in Glendale at 1300 Capistrano, and here they have 50-some steps, and so they're using a tram to help gain access to their house, make it more reasonable. This is an example of an in-ground tram, where you can see that the planting, everything comes up this side, and so all this rails and mechanics are hidden in the ground below view lines. Next. Cross section of the house showing that it is behind the knoll and tucked in between the knoll and the hillside behind. Next. And then this is various slides show our compliance with the hillside design guidelines. That we've stepped the roofs, stepped the house back, altered the massing. Again, roof style, different roof styles, different levels, again to conform to the hillside. Next. And even with the retaining walls, we have this cut retaining walls in a conscious way, and then we're covering them with landscaping and such to cut down on their visual impact. Next. And then this is just a chart showing the comparison of how we have reduced things from previous things, and also and then the length of retaining walls, which is not quite the 2,000 or 2,200 that they are claiming that we have. So in conclusion, and do I have 5 minutes? Is that what that yellow light is about? Oh, 1 minute. Okay, the design has addressed the previous concern of the Glendale Planning Department and the City Council members and neighborhood communities, and is aligned with the hillside design guidelines. Compared to previous applications, it has a shorter driveway, less grading, and smaller building footprint than previous applications. It has been reduced to only what is necessary to access and construct a home on a desirable site. The house is nestled into the natural hillside terrain, as in keeping with the surrounding neighborhoods and in scale and design. It is well below the allowable FAR and that of the surrounding neighborhoods. Over 90% of the site has been kept in its natural state. Only that which is necessary to access the site and construct the house has been disturbed. So all these factors have greatly increased the environmental impact, and we ask that you uphold the hearing officer's ruling.
Okay, thank you.
George, next would be George?
No, you have used up your 15 minutes, so I guess what we'll do is that if we have questions, then he can come up and answer those questions. Any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. The length of the driveway, the proposed driveway off Hasbet and parallel to the private, is it 510 feet? Where it starts and where it ends at the tram, the bottom of the tram or the tram station?
Yes.
It's 510. Can you tell me, and you mentioned some like 250 feet, and that's the
first section.
All the way to the
That is
flat
from
pad.
the Hasbeth, that's from Hasbeth Lane, till you get to the beginning of the flat pad.
So you
can go back to the first slide.
Yes.
So there is our access off Hasbeth public right-of-way. And then what I'm saying is just right to there, right to where you get to the flat pad. So that section right in through there is the 210 feet.
210 feet.
Or whatever number I said. Did I say 250 or 210?
250.
Okay.
So then, if you were to take 250 out of 510, the 190 or so feet that is remaining is from the private pad, from the flat pad to the bottom of the tram.
From that point to where the garage turnaround, and therefore the tram is, yeah.
The 190 feet.
I may have missed this in the discussion, but how do you plan to take trucks up to the actual building site, the building pad?
Well, an excavator can make that climb itself, and that would be along either the tram, where we're proposing the tram go, or the steps.
So you would make that a temporary driveway to where the tram is to get people.
That would be in one sense a temporary access.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, Also, you could build the tram and then use the tram itself for its mechanism to lift materials up to the site. I mean, concrete will be pumped up there. The site itself is a balance of cut and fill. So once you get a piece of equipment up there, it's not bringing dirt down. It's not having to take dirt up or having to bring dirt down. We're shaving parts, cutting into the hillside in parts and shaving parts of that off, and then that's turned around to fill in behind the retaining walls at that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that the road is the first thing that gets built is a road, right? The private driveway up to that point, so then you can start taking things up, and then the next phase would be the house.
Sequence of the construction will be the private driveway up to the garage site, and then from there on, we create a. I wouldn't call it a road or whatever up to the side. It will be more like path, a wide path.
Right.
And then that's how equipment and or materials will get up there. I mean, admittedly, it's not an easy site to build on, and there will be some extra effort made in order to do that. But we gain a nice site location by doing that.
And there was one of your early slides. You had the different locations of alternatives, and can you
go to the next slide?
There's so I just want to get myself. Alternative. The number 1 was the one you guys had originally.
That was on the top, very top. Yeah.
That was the very top, right? And number 6 was the first one.
Number 1 was the first one. Number 6 on the to the front of the knoll.
Yeah.
Was our second application.
What's number 2?
That is on over on Larco Way, and these are just where can we put the house, and then all these are sort of explanations of why it was feasible or not feasible, advantage or disadvantage. So sites like 2 had way more disadvantages than advantages. So we put them, the greatest one being that it's just an incredibly steep site, and how do you access it? I mean, you have to have the big long driveway again.
Yeah. How about just where number 3 is, if you keep going down that. No, I mean go. Yeah, I know, but keep going up to that little valley area. Middle.
That's a peak.
That's a peak.
That's a ridge.
This is coming up to.
It's coming up.
This is all straight up the hill to Rimcrest and Deermont.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
I want to follow up on Commissioner Astorian's question regarding the driveway, where it starts and where it starts from your property. The concerns the appellant had was the almost 3,000 cubic yards of dirt that's going to sit on the flat pad, which is going to load that pad. For the just housekeeping purposes, what if you used the easement rights? Somehow, you come to agreements with the neighbors and use that, and then not build that driveway. What are you? What is the cubic yard that you don't have to excavate?
May I ask George Bogosian, the civil engineer, to address that?
Can I address when I'm at?
Yeah. Can you please come up? State your name, please.
Good evening. My name is George Bogosian. Go ahead.
Yeah. The question is that if you were to use the easement rights of the Hasbeth Lane and not build that
road,
what is the amount of earth that you do not have to excavate?
There will be quite a bit different, at least some 50 to 60%.
50 to 60%, which then, if you use the Hesbeth Lane, which will reduce actually the amount of the dirt that you'll be putting on that pad also.
That's quite right.
Okay. Any more questions? The applicant?
Not at this time.
Okay. Before we go to the public hearing, we'll take a 5-minute recess. We're back from recess, Planning Commission in session. Before we go to the public comments, each speaker has 3-minute time limit. I'd like to ask you to speak on points, and when your turn comes up and really the speaker before you has spoken on the same issues, you're welcome to waive your rights, and we'll put your name on the record to save some time. And after the public speaking, we do have both applicant and appellant have 5 minutes each for rebuttal. So, I'd like to call up Mary Foley. Followed by Richard Gallagher. You have your chance during rebuttal time.
I think.
Yes, you're part of the applicant, and Mr. Dean has used up all 15 minutes. So. No, you are part of. So you'll be. You have your chance during the rebuttal time.
Hi, my name is Mary Follett. I live at 104 Darrell Drive, which overlooks Hasbeth Lane. I'm at the end of the cul-de-sac, so literally I get to look at this pristine hill and would be the most observant one of this road, because right now it's a beautiful hill. This road is just going to cut right through it. This has and continues to be a part of the road. The whole applicant wants is this road, and it's obvious, to develop the rest of these other sites. All you had to do is see where these other potential sites were. Mr. Dean made a comment that the site now that's being developed was recommended by Councilman Weaver. That's true. But he also said it should come off of Glenmont Road. Therefore, you'd only have one house. With this road, this private road going onto a pad or wherever on this street, she is planning to develop more buildings, more homes. Just take a look at what she had. The other thing is, as for the road, it is not environmental, so therefore it's against Part B. The other question I have is on the tram. Yes, it's nice you're going to have a tram to take you up and down like Disneyland, but he's also made the comment that they are going to have a partial road to get to the site. How is that road going to go in? Are they going to destroy it after the building is built? How are you going to get the trucks, the bulldozers, and everything up to that site? He's already said they've got a temporary road. Once that temporary road is in and it's paved, it's going to stay there. And the tram is just going to be a little ride for the visitors. Again, this continues to be the road. It's unsafe. And it's basic her development, and that's the beginning. If she doesn't have this road, she can't continue to build. She's had the right for easement off of Hasbeth, the private road, and she doesn't want that because she has to have her private road to to continue her development. Thank you.
We don't ask questions from the speakers, right? Or do we?
No, you could. You have a question for the
Yeah.
the
Just
speaker?
one question, ma'am. So then you're not against the development, you're against access and the potential of overbuilding the site.
The idea is that she has to have her road. If she doesn't have that road, she can't develop 3 or 4 or 6 homes on that lot, which is obviously what she's planning to do. Councilman Weaver suggested to go right off of Glenmont to that Saddleback, but she would have to get an easement from those Glenmont people, and she could only develop one house. If she gets access to this road, and she's allowed to have the CPU road, there's going to be more development. Thank you.
You have questions to the speaker, or?
No, I have
Okay.
a question for staff.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, commission, yes, it's a private road.
So Richard Keller, followed by Elsie Anderson.
Hi, I'm Dick Gallagher. I live on 1641 Hasworth Lane, right at the cul-de-sac where all the action begins. I think this is the same proposal that's been around for several years now, and I think the neighbors are all, again, concerned over what has been the issues forever. One of my questions is how long the construction will take. I think we should get a more definitive response from Mr. Dean rather than around 1 and 1.5 years. If that's what it is, I would double it. That means that we would have to contend with all the construction traffic over a rather lengthy period of time. And this means that all the cement trucks, lumber trucks, and all the other building material trucks will be flying up and down Hasworth, not more than 20 to 30 feet from our front doors. I think that's an awful lot to ask for the peace and tranquility that will be so abruptly compromised. But what is so disquieting to me is the dueling opinions as between the various geologists and applicants, engineers, and Mr. Michaels. The stability of the site is at issue. What comfort can the neighbors take with such a divergent and competing views? What do I know as a layman as I look up the hillside from the Kirsch's home and see where large retaining wall is falling down the hill, and one of these days I suspect it will tumble right down onto Hasworth. This is exactly one of the areas where the excavation is to occur. What is the neighbor supposed to think? My trust is with Mr. Michaels, particularly as I see the fissures and cracks up on Glenmont, which is above where the excavation and grading is to occur. It seems to me the city would want to be very careful on this issue and perhaps go outside and get yet another geologist engineer that is acceptable to all the various geologist parties involved here so they can come to an agreement. Otherwise, I see a big downside risk for the city, notwithstanding the comportment within city codes. I have a dumb question, which is apart from this, but if the permit is granted and the applicant subsequently sells the property before construction, does the permit transfer to the new buyer? That's just a question. I don't know if the permit travels with the new buyers.
Yes, the permit is good for a certain length of time. You have to implement your permit within a couple of years, or it becomes.
But it goes to a new buyer.
Yes,
if that's the case. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Elsie Anderson, followed by Martin Burke.
My name is Elsie Anderson. I live at 1677 Larco Way. So I'm right at the end of the cul-de-sac. And we built in 1954. There was not much there yet, so I've been there 57 years. And I've seen all this building going on, a lot of homes up on the mountains high above us, and mansionization of my neighbors on both sides. Never said anything because this is progress and change, which we all have to accept. But it seemed to me when they were going to take a quarter of the mountain to build on a 6-acre pad one, quote, dream house, we have to draw the line someplace.
Thank you. And Mr. Martin Burke, followed by Philip Keller.
Thank you very much. I'm practicing getting better at this. My name is Martin Burke. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I reside and own, with my wife, Pamela Sellers, in the front row, 1592 Glenmont Drive. Yes, we are concerned with the what's called the Glenmont slope. It does have signs of subsidence. We're not certain. It's a small private road. That really is what held up the road going up to the Saddleback. But what I would like to just ask the members of this commission to look at carefully is the actual construction of this home and the tram, or I like to think of it as a funicular, is that all the discussion we have here is as if one day out of the mist the house is going to appear. Now this case has a long history. Twice the City Council has voted unanimously to turn the various incarnations of this project down. We've lived here since, at our house, since November of 2003, and we're involved in the third fight. This is not what I had in mind for my retirement. But it seems like what we get is a different plan with modifications. The core problem with this has always been the road. Originally, it was 1,100 feet long with a slope as high as 17 degrees. Now, maybe it'd be wishful thinking that if a fire started, no one would be able to put it out, but I think it's going to be a real challenge to control any fire if it develops. But what I'm concerned with, as some of the speakers have said, how do the materials, how do the equipment that has to go up to build a house this size and move this much excavation, how does it get up there? It's not even clear. Does the funicular appear first and then the house? How does the funicular get built? I think this has been glossed over. The problem all along has been to overcome what was originally a 120-foot elevation difference. It's a little lower now, maybe about 70 feet, but that's still a lot of elevation to overcome to build a house. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for him. You live on Glenmont Drive. Is there under any condition that you guys would be okay to extend that driveway for a new house on that property?
Not being a city street, it's particularly small. Only one car can go up at a time, and people have to turn around in each other's driveways. We've had extensive discussions with the putative builder here, and they really all came to nothing. And eventually we got tired of it, especially when she was representing to various bodies that we wouldn't even talk to her. So that became a self-fulfilling promise. Okay? Thank you.
Mr. Burke, not to exasperate.
No, that's all right. I'm fine.
Your primary concern was how material can get to the site of the construction. Am I correct to characterize it as such?
Yes, I'd say that it's fair that my primary concern now is less the house location, which is less prominent, but more as to the length of time. I'm not sure if the city is aware of it, but we have a house that's been being worked on Glenmont itself, a little below us, and we figure it's been worked on continuously now for 4 to 5 years. And I come from a different part of the country, but we don't issue permits that go on indefinitely. And I'm worried that this could be a project. I'm also worried if there is hillside subsidence. We have no way to get in and out of our properties other than Glenmont. That hillside goes. We don't want to be in court arguing over who's going to pay for it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Philip Keller, followed by Mr. Hassan Kaganuri. Okay. Thank you.
Hello and good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Philip Keller. I represent the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association. I'm here today to express our association's continued concerns with this proposed project before you and why we feel it should not be granted the CUP. Glendale Municipal Code states that the review authority must first establish that all of the four findings must exist in order to grant the CUP, and we strongly still feel that the first two cannot be made. A, that the proposed use will be consistent with the various elements and objectives of the general plan. B, that the use and its associated structures and facilities will not be detrimental to public health or safety, general welfare, or the environment. Firstly, in finding A, we feel that the project is designed to cut the beginning of its proposed lengthy driveway into the steep hillside parallel to the existing portion of Hasbeth Lane is in stark contrast to the intent of the city's general plan safety element, which specifically says reduce the loss of life, injury, private property damage, infrastructure damage, economic losses, and social dislocation, and other impacts resulting from geologic hazards. The applicant, in our opinion, has not demonstrated that they have fully taken the potential danger and impact of cutting into the hillside into account, which we feel would very well threaten the stability of Glenmont Drive that you've already heard about tonight, and its residences above it, and consequently the residents directly adjacent on Hasbeth Lane. All of this has been brought up before and noted by the Planning Department and City Council in their opinions in the two previous attempts to obtain a CUP, but the applicant still continues to pursue this direction. Finding B, we feel that this project would be detrimental to public welfare, specifically to the adjacent neighborhood. By this, I'm referring to the incredibly long driveway and towering tram proposal. A 500-foot driveway would create a significant and substantial disturbance to the hillside and is completely out of context with the entire adjacent neighborhood. Additionally, we feel in contrast to the staff evaluation that this area is a transitional slope and should not be subject to any development as stated in the hillside guidelines. If you look at the diagram, it's this situation. The driveway is definitely not, and to quote the guidelines, minimizing the alteration of the terrain necessary for development. It's doing the opposite of the guidelines. Now, I want to put the proposed 110-foot long tram into perspective. This tram would be more than a third of the length of the landmark Angels Flight tram located in downtown Los Angeles and Bunker Hill, and is actually steeper incline, 40% compared to 33. That's mind-boggling. This is a hillside residential neighborhood, not a commercial site surrounded by office buildings. We feel this is very obvious and would clearly be detrimental to the welfare of the impacted neighbors. It also demonstrates to us that by the very pursuit by the property owner to site their home at the location they've chosen, this is what's caused all these problems to begin with, the choice of location. Is that my time? We urge the Commission to reject the CUP. We wish the owners, I'm going to wrap it up, we wish the owners to build their dream home, but build it in a responsible, compatible manner that takes into account the effects on the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, and
yes.
Sir, in your opinion, where is that location that they can build their dream home?
On the flat pad. In previous iterations of attempts to get the CUP and the other versions, they've claimed you cannot build on the flat pad in any way, shape, or form. Now they're going to build on. Now it's miraculously buildable to build a section of the driveway and the tram house and the area for the parking garage. If they can do that, they can build the whole house there at the back of the pad. It's got the best view out of any of the lots of Hasbeth Lane. Private C will still be maintained, set at the back of the lot. They would then get the easement potentially get the easement from the neighbors, wipe out all that huge driveway, saving time and money and aggravation for everyone, but they seem to be skirting that. Obviously, it's her property. She's going to choose to put the house where she wants it, but just because you can do something doesn't mean it's the right choice to make, and how what you do affects everyone in the life around you when you're building in a residential area, and we feel she needs to compromise and put it in this location.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The following speakers, actually not speakers, the cards that I have, the people who want to go on the record but do not want to speak. So Hassan Kagenuri.
Khajanuri.
Okay. Kagenuri. Thank you.
Was I close?
Okay.
Pretty close.
And Alfreda Kajenuri, Luis Milan. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your names. Okay. Luis Cuadrado. Thank you. And Anna Cuadrado. So we'll put your names on the record for in opposition of this project. Next we have Laila Ramirez.
Leila Ramirez, member of the community. I've followed these commission hearings for many, many years, and I would like to speak in support of the planning officer's decision. As I read my notice, the purpose of the hearing today is to hear comments from the public with respect to zoning concerns. The CUP is a component of the zoning code, and it's actually cited in staff's report. I think it's an excellent report. It's outstanding. It covers everything. It took a while to prepare, as you know, and I don't think anything was left out. If there is anyone that is well-versed in the hillside ordinance, the seismic safety element, the safety element, the general plan, it is our hearing officer. It is a well-done report, and in any case, the current proposal was and should be reviewed on its own merits, as stated in the staff report. The current application arguably reduces the impacts noted in the findings for denial of previous proposals on this site. Similarly, the history of discussions over a private easement or whether another site on the property may also be suitable for construction are not material to the decision on the current proposal, nor is speculation about some future abandonment of the project or sale of the project. Those are not before you. The staff has recommended that you sustain the hearing officer's decision and approve the project as proposed. Today, nor in the application, the appellant has not provided no specific. The appellant has provided no specific information in the appeal as to which findings were inadequate or why the findings are inadequate. This is a code requirement. The burden of proof is on the appellant, and it was not met. Further, we do not compromise our rights. And there is the conflict between the community and property rights of the individual was long settled, and it was settled by zoning law. That is what your decision is today. Thank you. I urge you to sustain the planning officer's decision.
I have one more card. Lela Halverson wants to go on the record opposing this project, but do not wish to speak. Okay. The last speaker I have is Patrice Magalon.
You realize we're not going to be able to sit down and read what you're giving us at this moment, right?
Yeah.
I wish you had given this to us prior to the meeting, but having said that, I'm not going to sit down and look at that right now.
That's okay, because I'll be referencing it.
Sure.
Sorry about that. My name is Beatrice Magallon. I live at 1617 Hasbeth Lane. I basically am here today to implode that you please reject the CUP. I basically live on this property. I feel that we're a community, a small community of homeowners that really value where we live and the community that we live in. We've seen this project many times. It's basically to us a safety hazard. The road has always been of issue to all of us. It's not been the home, although we have had objections to the home sitting on the top of the knoll. It really is the safety of this road being built, knowing that the owner of this property can have a free easement if she comes through Hasbeth Lane. The attorney misspoke when he said that the owners on 1656 Hasbeth Lane wanted for her to build her home on the flat pad. That was in 2007. In 2010, if you look at your documents, you will note that the only condition to the easement, a free easement, was one home. In 2010, that was the only condition. We don't care where she builds her dream house. She can have 10,000 square feet. We don't care. She can build it on top of the knoll. We don't care.
We care.
One home. You do care, and you should. You should. Because with our guidelines, she shouldn't be able to do what she's trying to do at this present time. One condition, that she build one home. I don't even want to use the language that she used back then because my daughter said, "Mommy, do not say that again." So I will not talk about something I don't want to talk about today. But here's what I want to say. The slope is over 68% steep in one area. They're saying that the retaining walls are going to be 5 feet. I gave you an accident that happened on 135 Cumberland Road, next door to this property owner, 2 houses away from my house. This person got dug into a home because they were carving into the hillside. That hillside is only 25 feet high. They have currently 18 feet retaining walls, 18 feet retaining walls with a 3-foot drainage trench and then another 15-foot retaining wall. They're claiming that on this 50-foot high hillside on Glenmont, they're only going to build 5-foot retaining walls back to back, just like this 18-foot and this 15-footer. This accident happened in the city's watch, under your watch. This accident happened in 2007. So if you don't know this address, 135 Cumberland Road, take a look at the records. Take a look at this newspaper article that I just gave to you, because that's exactly what's going to happen to these folks on Glenmont Road, and it's going to affect us all on Hasbeth Lane. I'm really, really tired of coming to speak on the safety of our community and to hear that this one person wants to build her dream house, and we'd like her to have her dream house. This is her property. She should have it. But why spend millions of dollars when she could come free through Hasbeth Lane? We would all have a party for her. Do it for free with an easement, one house. We would all agree to it. We would not come in to speak to you and to tell you not to let her build a 6,000 square foot pad. We don't care. We want to be safe in our communities. We want it to be there for our children. We want it to stay the way it is now. We don't want the density. We don't want her to build another 10 homes, 5 homes, like Mrs. Edith Fuentes said, 12 homes if she like. It's 6 acres. That's what they said. Your city employee said 12 homes can go on this property because there's 6 acres here. Well, I don't agree. I think it's our homes. The retaining walls, if you look at this, by your own engineers, because I've been coming to speak to your own people here, your engineer said the retaining walls are over 2,200 linear feet. 2,200 linear feet. You've got to look at these documents. You've got to look and try to protect the community that we live in. It's dear to us. It's an investment for our entire lives and for our children. Help us protect it. Please reject the CUP. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said the easement is okay as long as
One house.
one
It's always
house
been one
anywhere
house. We don't care.
on the lot.
Bring the owner up. Bring the
So it-
owner up. One house is all we care.
Wait, let me just clarify. So it doesn't have to be on the pad
No.
house.
It's
but
never
you're
had
okay.
to be on the pad.
So you're just against the driveway that's being proposed?
Yes. That's what's going to ruin Glenmont. That's what's going to ruin us because of all that feel. We're afraid that that's going to come down. It's. I don't know if you've gone through the 405. If you've been through the 405 freeway, have you seen of all those retaining walls going up?
Okay, I think
Exactly
I
what's
think
gonna
it's just I'm just trying to clarify because what the appellant was saying is that they would only be okay with the easement if it's only built in that
That was in
path.
2007. I want to clarify that. That was in 2007, not in 2010. Look at your records for 2010.
Yes, Mrs. Tyler.
I think I might be able to clarify. Right now, you only have one access to the property. It's zoned R1R. You have 135 feet of frontage, I believe, onto Hasbeth Lane. The minimum for subdivision in the R1R zone would be 100 feet of frontage for any new subdivision in the R1 zone. You could not use an easement for purposes of subdivision because our code requires that a lot have access to a public street. So right now, it's one lot. It would remain one lot. Under the zoning, you could have one home in the R1R zone. So while I hear a lot of discussion about future subdivision, this is not a subdivision request, and I can tell you just based on the access the way it is now, they would not be able to subdivide it as it presently exists.
And with their own private driveway?
Because they wouldn't have frontage. They wouldn't be able to meet the lot requirement for
Okay,
frontage.
so that is still for them to have just one house on the lot.
Right now, as it is right now, yes, that would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
But there is room for variance.
Excuse me.
Well, the answer would, I'm not saying they couldn't combine other lots in the future. I mean, there's always the potential that you can have multiple lots be included in a new subdivision, but the way the lot is configured right now, you would need to have a subdivision meeting the requirements of the R1R zone. You would need to have you need to have at least 200 feet of frontage on a public street. And at this point, as you can see on the map up there, it's posted, they have a landlocked. Well, they might have an easement to take access, but that's not suitable for subdivision purposes.
Well, thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Yusefian had asked the owner if she would agree to one home, and she didn't. She told him that no.
I have a question for you. Who are you representing? Are you
Myself.
yourself,
I'm an owner
right?
on
Right.
Hasbeth Lane. I am very concerned.
Okay, because the appellant representative came up and said one thing, and then you're kind of contradicting what he has said. So I just want to make clarification here.
The time ran out, their 15 minutes ran out, and the attorney did not represent them in the last case, the last time that we came in 2010.
I guess then he has during his rebuttal time to clarify this.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's,
Thank you.
Just as a statement, Mr. Chair, this is why I asked the questions that I asked from the attorney for June of 2010 letter. So, but having said that, we thank you for your input.
Okay, thank
Sure.
you. Okay, appellant, you have 5 minutes to rebut, and you have 5 minutes to rebut also.
There's a number of speakers.
Oh, I'm sorry. I called. I'm sorry.
Let me try to clarify, and from what I understood, Mr. Chair, you identified the number of speakers who were part of the applicant's team.
Exactly.
So that was explained to the chair at the beginning of the applicant's presentation. There was no objection to that, and so Mr. Dean took up all of the time of the applicant's presentation.
Richard Ramirez is not part of the team.
Okay. And again, if there's a separate card that's not identified, it's up to the chair. And the chair, I'm sorry. Excuse me. So it's really, Mr. Chair, it is up to you to decide how the hearing is going to be held. It's pretty clear who's part of the applicant's team, and you did have the authority to do that. As long as you announced who you were identifying as part of the team at the beginning. I thought you did. If you didn't, you can certainly you should call up additional speakers who submitted cards on the item that are not part of the applicant's team.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. When Mr. Dean came up, he did mention that Mr. Bogosian was part of his team representing the owner. So we do have Mr. Rich Ramirez as, I thought, part of the owner's team, but you could come up and speak.
See my card that I checked it off in the front? Bottom?
Sorry?
You can see at the bottom.
Yeah,
of what I
third-party
checked off.
technical
It's
review.
not part of the team. I'm an independent.
It doesn't say that. But anyways, go ahead, please.
Well, my name is Rich Ramirez. I'm a licensed engineering geologist in the state of California. And I, just to clarify this issue, I'm independent. I I'm a second-party reviewer, mainly indicating that I have reviewed the geosystems reports with the consultants of record. I have reviewed the Michaels reports, all except the last one, which was submitted yesterday, I guess. And I have reviewed all the grading plans, the city documents. I have reviewed the commissions, the previous commissions and previous city council meetings. And so I'm here just to let you know, as an independent, I'm a volunteer, by the way, to make sure that U.S. commissioners and everybody else involved in here understands the geological, geotechnical issues that are really critical. And I heard some questions raised earlier that no structural, that the fill was not going to be compacted. I believe the Commissioner Sheets made that statement, and it's not true. According to the grading plan, that is a non-structural fill. It will classified, which means you can't build a structure on it, but it has to be 90% compacted as required by city code. So it will be compacted, benched, and the whole thing. The other thing I'd like to point out is that Glenmont cracks have been brought up quite many times. I am very concerned about that issue, and I think the city attorney and the Department of Public Works people should be really concerned, because there are trash trucks that serve about 5 homes. There is a city water line, city sewer line, and that is could be a very potential problem. The applicants, that is off-site. You can't get a drill rig and do operation just like the city engineer indicated, because it's not her property. I think it's a city concern for the residents. They should hire their own consultants and investigate it, because it's very serious. Now, on the issue about the stability of the retaining walls for the driveway, that's been discussed many times and by many people. In my opinion, and I've been around for 30 years in the hillside development business, the installation of the retaining walls will actually improve the stability of the ascending slope. As long as it's done in increments, as recommended by the city engineer. I certainly agree with some of his comments that he stated. It's got to be done in increments. The applicant, is my understanding, that he has proposed to provide temporary shoring, which would stabilize the slope until a wall is built, and then the wall is going to be constructed according to code with the lateral pressures and so forth. I have a lot more to say about the tram and all the foundation systems. Just to kind of summarize, the 4 findings have been made by an excellent report by the city staff and Brad as well, and I concur with their findings. One more thing I'd like to say about the Michael's reports. He made a lot of comments about stability analysis and the placement of the fill, and that flat pad is going to fail. Well, number one, he's not qualified to make that statement. He's not a licensed engineer. Only a licensed geotechnical engineer, civil engineer can make that statement. Mr. Michael is not licensed in that field. The licensed geologist. So I just want to clarify that.
Question? Yeah.
One question, Mr. Ramirez. You mentioned about the fill going on the area of the existing pad.
Yes.
It was my understanding on a previous hearing that there was some question as to whether the current pad was compacted. So if that's the case, and are we saying that we're going to compact the added fill on top of non-compacted soil? Is that what would happen there? Would that be an issue?
No, it's not an issue in my opinion. I requested in my review of the geosystems reports, I had a concern about that as well, and I asked them to drill 2 borings, and they did. They did actually drill 2 borings, sampled, and they did an analysis of consolidation and loading and all that. So it's not an issue, but I had the same concern you did.
Thank you.
It's been resolved as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
I have a question. You just mentioned that there were some cracks. What is that name?
Glenmont Drive.
Glenmont. And that should be the concerns of the city. But by cutting into the hillside from the Hespeth Lane, in your opinion, are you not compromising and worsening that condition?
No, not as long as it's properly done. And I think the city engineer indicated that as well. Geosystems had indicated that. I agree with that. City engineer has indicated that. And I concur. That's three people, three licensed professionals that indicated it's not a problem.
But then, okay, just to further that point, then what would be the concern that you alluded to that the city should have relative to the substructures that are on that
It's an
street?
off-site concern, yes, sir.
Well, it's an off-site concern that would cause what to happen?
It could be a mudslide, could be a slide.
Down that slope?
On the slope, yes.
Okay.
But it would be triggered by the activities or lack of maintenance on a private
the
street,
roadway.
not on Adele's property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends the public comments. So we have appellant. You have yes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Bogosian a question, if I may, as the engineer, civil engineer.
Go ahead,
Mr.
please.
Bogosian, may I please have you at the podium?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of Commission, and city staff. My name is George Bogosian. I'm the civil engineer of the project, and my address is 1111 North Brand Boulevard, Suite 202, Glendale.
Thank you.
Mr. Bogosian, Mr. Michaels stated that the reference made to Unity and Hasbut and the fact that if we go on Glenmont, it may compromise Hasbut Lane and so forth. What are your views on that?
Of course, as a civil engineer, we are prepared and we have studied to be a soils engineer also, but I don't practice soils engineer. But the only thing I can say is this, that Mr. Michaels has not made any investigation to say that. First of all, you have, just like Mr. Ramirez mentioned, you do borings, you do tests in order to come up with any valid information to make that statement. However, even so, even he is concerned about the stability of the slope. It is actually what we are doing. The work we do now, it's going to stabilize Glenmore Drive. We are introducing first time the piles, grade beam, which will be embedded into bedrock to the depth which is required by the soils engineer. And this itself is going to stabilize the entire slope. This is first time actually you're helping both above and below. And all this is going to be done by the approval of the city, by a proper soils report and design, civil engineers design, structural design. So it's not, at this point, we are submitting these plans only for CUP. It's a conceptual. The final plans, as the city engineer mentioned, it will be done and processed through the building, through the engineering department, whereby they will be approving every bit of it they check. As the planning department, you can see how far they have gone, the staff, how deeply they have reviewed before they approved this project.
Thank you.
And if now that I'm here, if I may just add, this access is a rather very important issue. It has been. If you wish, I'll explain that without this access, you cannot do this project. It is a landlocked. There is no other.
Ms. Bogosian, you can do that during your rebuttal time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any questions?
That'll do. Thank you.
So, Appellant, you have 5 minutes to rebut.
I just would like to say that Mr. Ramirez has been part of their team since the beginning. Every time we submit a report, Mr. Ramirez responds to it. He's done borings out there, and the contention that he is not part of their team and he gets extra 5 minutes and we don't is simply, it's just not accurate, it's not true, and it's not fair because we have the burden of proof. And I would just request that I have 5 minutes too.
Is that your rebuttal?
You have
No.
5 minutes for rebuttal.
No, Ms. Kirch wants to speak.
So it was my discretion that when you came up and I read off your team members, and you had no problems at the time, so that was your 15-minute time that was given to you. I do remember when I asked Mr. Dean to state their team members, he did not mention Mr. Ramirez. He did mention Mr. Bogosian, so that's why I allowed extra 3 minutes for Mr. Ramirez to speak.
I understand what you're saying, but it still was a ruse.
You have 5 minutes to rebuttal now.
Okay.
Start his time again.
For this rebuttal, I'd like to explain a couple of documents that you got. My name is Delma Kirch.
Right.
I live on 1656.
You're part of this rebuttal.
Oh, I'm part of the
5
rebuttal.
minutes, yes.
Okay. You got two documents. One is the subdivision for that lot in 1970. There was no road, big or long road approved for that subdivision, as is stated by Mr. Cullen. And 1972, that lot was proposed to be re-subdivided into 5 lots, and even then, it was not approved, by the way, and even then, there was no big road proposed at the time. So please review that documentation before, at some point, I hope, Mr. Garcia.
I want to clarify something. The reason the geologists were licensed in this state was because civil engineers didn't recognize problems, hillside problems. Geologists now, it can be fairly said, define the problems, and soils engineers solve the problems. That's really the distinction. Whether or not this property has been properly designed or not, it's true I have not made an investigation. I have simply looked at what has been done. There's not a word that I've said, either tonight or in any other time before this body or the City Council, that is not in the examination papers that the examinations that engineering geologists are required to take to become certified. I know that because I helped write those examinations. I've been I've been in this practice for over 50 years, and I know what I'm talking about. And it's not true that because I'm not a soils engineer that I don't have legitimate views about this matter. Are there any questions on that, gentlemen? Thank you.
I know I don't have much time left. I reiterate my problem. I didn't know Mr. Ramirez was even a speaker. So one of the issues is when you drive a truck or bulldozer up the hill, you're going to be at a 50 to 60% slope, which a truck would be unsafe. It could dump its load down on my client's property. They're going to have to carve a road into the hillside in exactly the area where the City Council did not want a road carved. That's the only way they can do it. They have not established that that tram would carry tons of concrete, tile, lumber, and so you can't make the findings that this can be done, finding A, that this can be done without affecting the hillside, within the hillside development guidelines. This project does fall within the hillside development guidelines, and if you look at page 3, section A, it shows that it does, and that the health and safety and general welfare, those are all the issues. You do not have enough information before you to make finding A and finding B. there's too much unknown that you don't, for you to make those findings. And the problem is that this has been necessary from the beginning, and it has been skirted around and never been provided to any hearing body as to how this can be safely done. Thank you.
I got a question. Can you explain the contradiction between the statements that you said the easement can only be used, it's only built in the lot? Someone else on Hasbit Lane said they can use the easement, just build one house anywhere.
I don't know this lady. I just know that in the conversations that we met in my conference room at my office with the developer and the owner and George Bogosian, and then I met again over at George Bogosian's office, and it was clear that we were talking about building either on the pad or, as I said previously, somewhere near the pad. It could be behind it. Well, Mr. Bogosian and I talked about moving it somewhere, but it would not involve a road any more than the access. So to some extent, yes, we wanted to limit it to one house. That was clear, but mainly on the pad or, as I said in my earlier testimony, somewhere near the pad.
Well, I think the appellant on the record is Dalma Kirch, so I think, yeah, you need to come up and clarify.
Clarify that. Mr. Wright was very helpful with us, or to us, during the 2007 negotiations. We asked him to help us because we had no idea how this was done. So we asked him to help him. And from the beginning, our condition was to build one home. And obviously there was a lot of paperwork there. We said, we asked her to sign a deed restriction and to build on the flat pad. So that's what Mr. Wright remembers, because he worked very hard and long with Mr. Bogosian because building on the flat pad was also one of our requirements. They said no, and so that's why they started looking at different sidings. And in fact, some of those that they're being used today, they discussed also. So that was 2007. In 2008, we didn't use Mr. Wright. And we did it through the help of Mr. Dean. And it got just messy. But again, it was always one home, no further trying to build a separate road. That was our request. At the end of those negotiations, because we wanted to make sure that whatever mess was created, we asked Mr. Wright to write the easement that you saw on 2010, and that is the June 22nd. And, he did it very fast, so probably he doesn't recall that it was one home. And there's several little things that is, I guess, part of a private road situation.
So just to clarify, your position now is one home anywhere? No, anywhere.
Well, follow the guidelines, So
location.
anything that follows the
but it doesn't
guidelines
have to be at the flat pad.
What we don't want is that road.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's that. And
what was the last thing you said, ma'am? You don't want what?
The road.
The private road
That road.
being built.
But if you read these documents, you might have a pretty good insight there.
It would have been nice if we
Yes,
got that
unfortunately,
earlier.
we were not thinking about talking 1970 situations, but it came up on the staff report. So I had to rush to the city and got that stuff today. So I'm sorry about
Mrs.
that.
Kirch, you heard from the staff that the present condition, the way the lot is configured, that they cannot build more than one home.
Yes.
So I just wanted for you to understand that. Thank you.
That's us.
Okay. Applicant, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay.
First of all, I want to apologize for misunderstanding the speaker card situation. First of all, George Bogosian will take 3 minutes, and then I'll come back to the two.
George Bogosian, for the record, I'm the civil engineer of the project. What I like to make it as short as possible. The access is the only way that you can get onto this site. There is no other access. Anything else that the architect showed to you on the screen, they were all requiring easements. You had to acquire easement from private owners. So this is the only access that you can get into the site by constructing this driveway. Otherwise, the site is completely, it will be landlocked. The driveway that we are building, proposing to build, it will definitely improve the stability of this slope that it is so much concern, whether it's crack, whether it is the pavement crack on Glenmont Drive. It may be just like any cracks, like sometimes you get on totally flat land where the driveways are, they call it crocodile. It's so much cracks all over. It's the pavement due to the temperature changes, it does crack. So the reason I said that Mr. Michaels has not done any testing to find out whether these cracks are as a result of any movement of this slope or what. So therefore there is no valid argument in there. But assuming it was true, assuming that it is subsiding or moving, by doing what we are doing, we will be holding the stability of that slope by introducing those friction piles, grade beams, to a depth as it will be specified by the soils engineer. And the soils engineer generally stands up at the site to make certain that the excavation that they are doing, it goes into the bedrock sufficient length based on the design that is required. The next thing that was brought up, the drainage. Drainage now, based on this grading plan, we have prepared in such a way that completely this drainage is taken into account either by V gutters along the walls or else draining onto the new driveway where it will be spilled into public street. And the next is speculations of how it's going to be built. One is a civil engineer, one is a contractor, one is a soils engineer. We don't know. Okay, we don't know really. Each one knows how to build. If the person doesn't know how to build, what it takes on the, at the stages, obviously not everybody can tell how it's supposed to be done. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be...
At the end of the rebuttal, we'll ask.
Anyway, just to wrap up, this application is for one single-family residence only. The drive access is, really, it's only 11 feet wide. So that in itself limits the development to one single house, other than what the hearing officer was explaining to you also. All construction access is to be temporary, and it will be restored to its natural conditions after the project is done. By the way, lifts are used all the time, so you can Google lift, and you'll see that to raise heavy materials, concrete block, roofing tiles, things like that, up on construction sites. And lastly, we feel that the safety concerns have been addressed preliminarily, and they will continue to have to be addressed during the DRB and during the permitting process. So thank you very much, and I hope you uphold.
Questions, decisions? Commissioner Sand?
Okay, so I'm remaining a little bit confused. Are you guys okay if the easement was granted? Would you guys take it for this house? Or would you not want to build the private driveway still?
I think that's a question better for the owner, quite frankly.
Yeah, what?
I just want to make it clear that our zoning code requires you to take access from your own property. So even if they were to get an access agreement to use an easement for access, they would need to obtain a variance for that.
Yeah, I mean, which is a point I was making earlier.
And I would add that the application before you is this, to take it off the street, not with easement. If they want to,
That's an
if
alternative.
they want
later.
to negotiate something, then they can come back with a subsequent application. But my suggestion is that you act on this application.
So that if I may ask the city attorney a question. Mr. Garcia, if there are discussions about change of access with the variance that we're talking about, which in itself is an does that change considerably the description of the project that we can't go?
In my view, it does, because you have the variance issue. You have the hearing officer probably would have looked at the application differently. Maybe not less so, but just they'd have to take.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have the private driveway proposed.
I'm sorry.
You wouldn't have the.
And you would have you'd have a different access point.
So are you telling me that it's not within the discretion of this four commissioners to actually say, for example, hypothetical, that you have to change this access, continue as, but from the private, and you got everything else that we can't do
we
that.
certainly can't do that because you would need an application where the persons that have the right to grant that access have signed the application. We don't have that. We have the opposite where they haven't granted that, and so the owner has applied to come through Hasbeth.
So I'm sorry to make the question.
That was it.
So in other words, I can't have a modified motion or a third motion.
You can't have a motion that imposes a condition which requires another property owner to.
Now, if the applicant told me now in this meeting that yes, we would use the easement, granted what they just said, then that would change the way I would vote on this.
The applicant, or
if the applicant said that we want to go back and then renegotiate because it looks like they're saying that you can use the easement, then that would change the way I would vote on this.
Well,
now,
if that's what is being said, and I'm not sure that's what is being said, but
that's why I was starting to ask questions.
Calendar and let those parties if they really believe that, and this particular project, as you know, has been here before in various iterations, and I've heard those conversations going on throughout. And so, rather than base that on some negotiation that may or may not happen, my suggestion is just act on what's before you. If you don't like it, based on the record, then deny it, because we'll just keep going back and forth. And might really act on this because you don't
because
have
then they can go and do another renegotiation. Okay, that makes sense.
I think we had all similar questions on this.
If I make what's next, Mr. Chairman?
Well, we'll be closing the public hearing to go into deliberation. So if we don't have any more questions.
May I just have 30 seconds?
No, you may not.
It was just regarding something we've been talking about.
I'm sorry, you may not. You had your rebuttal time. Thank you. So if we don't have any more further question, the applicant or opponent, I'll be closing the public hearing, and let's go into deliberation. Commissioner Schitz, your thoughts, please.
Okay. Just speaking to the issue at hand. I feel that the owner has rights. I think that the development as it occurred, leaving the flat pad, I think the intent was to build a house there. Whether that is relevant or not, I just want to give you my flow of thought. I personally feel that in a certain way, if you try to make the findings, I think finding A is suspect from the standpoint that I think it's kind of an insincere effort to get around the ordinance of building on the ridge. But I can see the thinking. I can understand the flow of thought there. We're going to use a stairway. We're going to use a tram. We're going to leave the fill on the lot. A lot of those things give me concern. But I can understand making finding A. My trouble is with finding B. And part of the reason that I'm struggling with this, I would like to use the experts' information, all of the research, but what's troubling to me is we have conflicting reports. We have dueling reports that give totally opposite from the quote-unquote experts or the engineers that give totally conflicting responses, which I guess is more than, and it's not unusual, but it causes me concern. Who is right? Who do you trust, or what is the safest, what is the most correct? I don't know. So based on that, I get to give my decision, give my input. So concerns I have are about the drainage. That bothers me. About the compaction, the fill staying on a non-compacted lot. Probably because I don't understand how that will work, but it bothers me. It troubles me. The big issues for me are the drainage. It's a natural flow. I know you can engineer anything, but we're adding components on top of other components that bother me, that trouble me about the safety of the drainage. It could probably be designed. I'm not pleased with it. The whole issue about Glenmont and working the road access, probably going to end up, if this thing goes, they're going to have access to some point. To me, the minimum cut and road would be the best way to go. But this is not created by the owner. The city has some blame here, or not blame, but to make that lot in this situation without the access is really a problem. And but the owner bought the property and needed to do due diligence and know these things. So, I can see both sides of this, and it troubles me. I believe that the one expert said about the lot being built in the 50s and developed in the 50s, we don't really know what's there. I don't know what the impact's going to be. I trust Mr. Ramirez's report and his research because I've seen his work. I've dealt with him before, and I trust it. But there was some talk about going to design review, and they would probably pass, or I'm using my terms, but it could pass, possibly pass design review. And then there was a comment about, but this is the point at which we decide whether this can be built or whether there are some unsafe conditions. I kind of agree with that. So I guess that pretty much sums up. What I'm looking at. What's the impact of the cut? I think the pad could be used. There could be an easement, and there are solutions. There are directions to go, and I think that we were alluding to that at the end of our discussion. I think there are options other than the ridge or the pad, but it's been brought up that that's really not what I'm dealing with. But I think from a safety standpoint, finding B is the toughest one for me to make, and that's where I lose it. You could maybe convince me A, but I don't think you could convince me that it's going to pass muster on item B. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, Commissioner Yesaya?
This has been going on for a long time, and I think everybody's frustrated from it and wants to see it completed soon. These kinds of properties are always really tough, especially this one, when it's on a hillside. There's a lot of variations on where things can be built, and there's a lot of places that people, or the guidelines don't allow it to be built. We've seen 2 proposals, and I think we came to a realization that those will not work on that property. This is the 3rd one, and it seems to be the most reasonable one out of all the ones that we've seen so far. Obviously, the owner has a right to build there. They need access to it in some way, and the easements. If the easements are not allowed, or if the neighbors there, put a lot of different conditions to not allow access to it, which now it seems like they might feel differently about it, then they're going to have to find another way. And this seems to make the most sense as far as getting access to that lot, putting a private driveway. If you're not building it at the very bottom pad, and you want to build it anywhere else in the whole property, where it's proposed right now seems pretty reasonable to me, and it goes with the hillside guidelines. It goes with the existing slope lines, and it's at the very bottom of where it is. So that seems reasonable to me. Obviously, it would be nicer if they weren't creating that private driveway, and I don't think anybody likes that driveway. And I would be surprised if the owner even likes that private driveway. But if they can't have access to a way to get there, then they leave no choice. So I'm going to come down and support it because, and for the findings, I think the findings, they meet the findings based off of this is just the minimum they're doing to get access to where they're getting and the home that they're trying to build. They proposed having a driveway all the way through the house, and they're not even proposing that right now. So this is a way to minimize or mitigate some of that as well. And I think they've found some innovative way by creating a tram and creating stairways so they don't have to have this road that goes all the way up there. So I think that's a compromise, in my view. I would support this based on the findings, and then I would encourage the neighbors to go and talk to each other and negotiate and maybe find a solution where this driveway doesn't have to be built and the easement could be used. So I would support it with that encouragement. It's not a condition. Thank you.
Commissioner Sterry.
Sure. Mr. Chair, I go back, and my wings were clipped about a second ago here, as far as wanting to make another motion. I'll be very honest with you. I look at the June letter, the attorney from Mr. Wright to the applicant with the 6 conditions. I look at the answer that the applicant had made in continuing to drive the private driveway off Hasbeth and being able to access their property, which, I mean, they got to have access. And they had to go through a variance to be able to get that. That, to me, with the exception of condition 2 of the six points that your attorney had made, was the way to go. It had the least effect on the hillside. It had the least visual impact. And as the owner of 1617 Hasbeth said, you would have had a party by now. But that's not the way that it worked out. I have a staff report in front of me that is telling me that they have found all of the findings. At the beginning, I said I liked what I read in this staff report because it was really meticulous, really detailed. I do have a problem, though, still, with the finding B, and it has to do with the driveway again. Now, Mr. Dean, the architect for the applicant, stated that the length of the driveway from Hasbet, from the frontage on Hasbet, all the way to below the tram, and we talk about trams, I feel like I'm in Swiss Alps right now, I mean, with this word of trams and so forth, was about 510 feet. Imagine if you would, and again, I'm being redundant, and I'm trying to encourage, indirectly, I'm trying to insinuate that you guys need to see this thing in a different light. If you were to take away 250 feet, then you are contending with another 250 feet. I mean, that's really taking away a great deal of impact. By the admission of Mr. Bogosian, your cut and fill would have been reduced tremendously. So the way I look at this letter, the way that it came out, was an opportunity lost, serious opportunity lost. Nobody needed to have a conflict resolution course from Harvard to be able to put this thing together. And I'm not trying to get on anybody's case, but I seriously am looking at it, and it's very upsetting because now, by code, they are entitled to have access to their land, whereas through the easement, through the private drive, they had to get a variance. You're not going to be able to deny them access to their land, and as difficult as it is for me to make the finding be. And it's a struggle, Mr. Sheets, but I can make the finding. It is really right there. I mean, seriously. So with that, I think you know where I'm headed, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Storian. I share the same sentiment as the other commissioners in that I think there was a communication breakdown between the applicant and appellant. Really, I think if that road was chosen, I think applicant could have saved a lot of money, really, by not, don't have to excavate 60% of your earth work there. Somewhere along the line here, that communication was lost, and now here we're looking at right to build. This case was again before us in the past, and I guess commissioners up here we're not to really engineer this project here, but to really look at what we have here as far as the land use goes. But in the course of the discussion, we've learned that our engineers, our staff, has done an extensive study and looked into all the possibilities and all the concerns from the neighbors. And I feel very confident that staff has addressed all those issues. So really, then it comes down to, as other commissioners said, are we going to landlock this lot, or are we going to allow access to this development? I am hoping that the applicant, maybe even after the decision here today, because of the economics of the development, of trying to excavate for the driveway, that you choose maybe the other option and go through the variance process to for the easement. But for the purpose of making decision here, I do have to go along with my other commissioners and sustain the decision of our staff. So with that, I'm ready for.
I'll move.
Motion.
Okay, I'll move that upon consideration of all materials and exhibits of current record relative to conditional use permit case number PCUP 2011-012, located at 1650 Hasbeth Lane, and after having conducted a hearing on said matter, that the Planning Commission hereby repeals the adoption of the. Oh wait, I'm reading the wrong one. Sorry, guys.
Wrong one.
Where's the other one?
There you go.
Oops. All right. Cross out what I wrote. I move that upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits and current record relative to conditional use permit case number PCUP 2011-012, located at 1650 Hasbeth Lane, and after moving conducted an appeal hearing on said matter, that the Planning Commission hereby sustains the planning hearing officer's decision adopting the negative declaration and approving said conditional use permit case number PCUP 2011-012 in accord with the findings set forth in the decision letter of August 25th, 2011.
Seeking support?
Second.
Now, the findings, I know that in the, there were some conditions. It's not kind of mentioned here. Should that be mentioned here, or?
If you're sustaining the hearing officer's decision, then that decision includes the conditions of approval.
Thank you very much for the clarification. So we have motion and the support. Roll call, please.
Planning Commissioners Astorian?
Yes.
Planning Commissioner Sheets?
No.
Planning Commissioner Esayan?
Yes.
Chairperson Lee?
Yes. The vote of 3-1. CUP 2011-012 has been sustained. Okay, let's see.
November 6th.
So planning division updates. Planning division updates.
Mr. Ramirez?
Excuse me, Mr. Ramirez.
Still in
The
session.
session's not
We'll be
over.
talking after.
Yes, we're still in session.
We haven't
Yes.
finished yet.
Planning division updates.
For your next meeting, we do have 2 appeal items which are scheduled. And then we also have a report back on story polls, which you had asked for before. So that will be returning on the 16th.
That's a report on.
Just an update. You asked about story polls for wireless facilities.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be returning with a report on that.
Oh, great.
Comments from commissioners?
I do have one.
It's Mr. Sheets.
Just as to make another pitch for the item that, at the risk of making some people unhappy, the comment that Mr. Milano made about whatever we want to call it, the recreation element and the
Parkland.
the parkland allocation. I'll just kind of list the items, that the parkland allocation, the lack thereof, essentially, I won't say not following them, but the lack of ability to meet those standards is really, really critical. And I knew that when we put that recreation element together when I was on the Parks Commission. So relative to that and some of the things that happened with the mitigation measures, I would think that if the other commissioners would like to do it, we might want to in some way address the issue or talk about it to the degree that we at least understand it clearly, because it is severe. It's mainly severe in the southern part of the city. We knew when we put that together, at least I did in my heart, we'd never meet them in my lifetime, but we had to put the report together and do our best, and there are a lot of other economic issues why we didn't do it. So with that in mind, Mr. Hagani maybe has some input on that. Maybe.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We recognize, like Commissioner Sheets just stressed, that some of these ideals that have been incorporated as standards in the general plan may just be that, ideals. We have done some preliminary work, and we discovered that some of these standards are coming up that people have incorporated in the general plan are similar to those that would be done in the Midwest and parts of the country where that is really reasonable to have that level of expectation. To be completely blunt with you, staff does not think that some of the standards that are in the general plan are appropriate or doable within a built environment in a 100-year-old plus city. And then given the nature of our city and the change in topography and nature of development that we see, we think a varied approach to open space and park requirement may be more appropriate, and taking into account some of the more urban nature of parts of our city, we need to really revisit and come up with a much more sophisticated approach to what might constitute an open space requirement and where and how we should be calculating that. That's part of what we're doing as part of our community plan approach. We're updating the general plan not in the old-fashioned way, element by element, but as community by community. So as we go to each community in the city and we analyze each community, we're going to come up with appropriate measures and appropriate ways to approach each part of the city separately, and in the end we'll tie them together with some overall city approach policy, more broad policy. Mr. Stotler and Mr. Loomis have been putting together a very, very extensive format, a very original approach to the general plan, and as we go through the general plan update, they will be updating you on that. But that issue is one of the main issues that we are actually addressing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sagani. If we don't have any more comments, then I'm ready to. Okay, so adjourned.